podcast, everybody? I'm Buckeye Boggs. That man over there is the wild man, Chris Wilds, and this guy needs no introduction. Former Ohio State linebacker Brian Rolle is in the house with us tonight. Brian, thank you so much for joining us here on the OHIO podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we are tickled pink to have you. Of course, the OHL podcast is brought to you by Fansided and Big Banter. We're thankful for both of them tonight. And Brian, let's just jump right in. And folks in the chat, there's quite a few already watching live in the chat. Go ahead and give us your questions for Brian Rolle. We want to make sure that you have your questions answered, as much involvement tonight as possible. But Brian, you were a Florida man. You were down there in the Sunshine State when you were in high school. How did we get you to come up to the Midwest to Ohio State to be a Buckeye?
I always asked Luke Fickle when I was at Ohio State, how the heck did they find me in one of the smallest towns in South Florida? He just told me, we have our way of finding guys. But I remember going to the 2006 one versus two game with Ohio State, Michigan. And prior to that, I had been to a Florida LSU game, and I thought that was the best it got. And I always tell the story because I remember walking into the stadium and not really remembering the game, just the atmosphere was electric. And I called my mom that night from the Blackwell, and I told her I'm coming to Ohio State. It's just that game, man. It was nothing like it. The atmosphere, the people, the just you just it's like one of those things, the saying that you just had to be there, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what it was for me. And I knew I was going to be a Buckeye after that game.
Now, did you have any relationships established before that with any coaches, or was that kind of the beginning stage of your recruiting, or was that more towards the end there?
That was actually in the beginning for me with Ohio State. Being a South Florida guy, for all intents and purposes, I was going to University of Miami. And I remember when Larry Coker got fired and Randy Shannon kind of took the reins. Me and my head coach had a conversation about it in high school about they're wanting to pursue more offensive needs that they had at the time. So I had to kind of scramble and look for other schools, and I didn't know much about Ohio State. A couple of people at my high school actually taught or went to school at Ohio State and kind of nudged me in that direction, and I thank them to this day for it.
Awesome, awesome. Man, we got some good questions coming in, Chris. I'm going to pull one of the fan questions right away, and then, Chris, you can ask the next one to our very special guest tonight, Brian Rolle. Larry Daniels, who's from Florida, he's from living down in Florida. He says, "Welcome, Brian. Any favorite memories versus that team up north?"
Oh man, so I would say the favorite memory is winning four times in a row. That I tell people, it's a great feeling to know you wake up every day and you've never lost to Michigan. Uh,
Woo!
uh, I tell people one of the fondest moments though. There's always this video that shows Grant Schwartz walking down the tunnel when we were at Michigan, and one of the Michigan players bumping into him. That game there, we played at Michigan Stadium in 2009. Um, that game was more memorable because that's my first time being a starter in their house. And man, their fans may be the most obnoxious people in the country. Um, and to be able to beat them on their home turf, it made life so much worth living at that time, honestly.
Chris, I got to jump in, man. After that answer, two things. Number one, wear all your gold pants, brother.
I have all my gold pants. My wife has her pair as she should, and then my
Yes.
parents actually keep most of all my football stuff down in Florida. I actually have a couple jerseys here in our basement hanging up, but my parents hang on to pretty much everything I have.
Okay. All right. And let's talk about the tunnel. Okay. Chris knows where I'm going here. All the incidences that happen in that place. There's one common denominator. It's them. Like, give me your perspective as an Ohio State player. Let us all know what it's like in that tunnel and what it's like going up against them in their house before the game in that tunnel.
Well, it's terribly constructed, so you share the same walkway on and off the field. There's nothing to separate people. There's not a cop standing in the way to guide. Um, so obviously players go out pregame and warm up. And the two times I played in that stadium has always been instances where we just happen to time it up, walking out of the locker room at the same time, and we're not gonna move ourselves out of the way to make room for them, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
it's always an instance where you're bumping into one of their guys or even the coach, honestly, because at the end of the day, there's no love lost there.
Chris, what's your question, buddy?
Well, Brian, my man Eric here, he's got this major bromance going for Jim Tressel.
Oh yeah.
So, and this is probably one of his questions he had stashed away, but what are kind of like your memories or thoughts on Jim Tressel and maybe your favorite Jim Tressel story?
Oh man, Coach Tressel, man. What's funny is we actually talked this past week. So he actually sent. I don't know if he sent it to every guy, but he sent one of your first days on campus as a freshman. They have you fill out your goals and aspirations, things
Hmm.
that you want to do while you're at Ohio State, and then life thereafter. So we talked earlier this week. He said, "I'm going to send you something in the mail," and I got it at the end of the week. And just reading through that stuff reminded me why he was such and is such a great guy. Is that he invested so much time in us becoming great men. Um, Most of the stuff that he sent, actually everything he sent, it really had nothing to do with football. Just about how can Brian Rolle be a great player? How can I be a great person? What kind of person I want to be in the community? What are my values? Things like that. And those are the things that I think about when I think about Jim Tressel. It's just a guy of great value, a guy of integrity. I always tell people the story of when we were losing to Penn State at home. Um, I want to say it was either 2009 or 10. Um, Tressel was the guy of he didn't have to yell, he didn't have to curse because his presence just commanded respect. I remember going to the halftime, we were down 10-3. Um, and Tressel, man, I've never seen fire in this dude like I did at that time. Um, I would say we knew we weren't going to lose the game, but he instilled fear in us, man, to make us think we were losing by a bigger margin than we were. Um, and he just looked at us like, "You guys think this is Big Ten football? You think this is Big Ten football?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, we're in a close game with Penn State, and at the time they were playing their best football." Um, and he has some choice words for us, which we deserved at the time because as a defense we didn't play well, and as an offense we were kind of struggling. But that's probably one of the moments that stands out to me because you rarely saw Tressel get as fired up as he was. The hair on the back of his neck was standing up. He had so much fire in his veins at the time, and obviously we came out with the win in that game.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the list because oddly enough, I was listening to Bobby Carpenter on the radio last week, I think it was, and he and Schlegel both said that they got their list in the mail.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, that's funny that you brought that up.
So he's keeping tabs on you guys if he's got all of your addresses, right?
yep.
Oh, what a great guy, man. That just every time we interview any player, there's not been one player who's played for Jim Tressel that I have talked to, we've talked to, that has anything negative to say about that man.
I mean,
Um,
there's he is literally the epitome of greatness. When I think about people in my life outside of my father, who's had a significant impact on who I am today, Jim Tressel is top two. I would say Jim Tressel, and then my high school coach, and he just it's just he understood. Obviously, he's been through so much more life than I had at the tender age of 18 years old coming to college. Um, but the way he was able to relate with the players on a personal level, it made you want to do nothing but be the best for him and for the staff that he put together.
this is a question from Ryan Wickerham, who he asked earlier if you remember him from Braxton Miller's football
Yep,
camp. But
yep. The football camp in I forget the town we went to that had the football team that was I think they kind of dissipated, but it was probably what 3 years ago. I want to say it's been 2 or 3 years ago.
okay, yeah, everybody knows Ryan, right? Ryan says, "Who was your favorite assistant coach when you were at Ohio State?" Good question, Ryan.
Oh man, assistant. Oh man. Oh boy, Luke Fickle is my guy. Um,
Okay, okay.
I love Luke Fickle, man, because again, he was outside of trust and one of those guys that he just demanded so much from you. And I'll look back on it. I thank him for it because I felt like at the time as a young kid coming in, why are you being so tough? But at the end of the day, he wanted nothing but the best. And obviously, he's turned out to be a great coach, a head coach with Cincinnati and now at Wisconsin. That now I know why he pushed so hard because he wanted us to be great. I'll be remiss if I didn't mention another guy, Doug Davis,
Okay.
rest in peace, who was our strength coach, um, who had passed away. So I always call myself B Thrill. And most people are like, where do you get that from? Is Doug Davis. Like this dude was one of the most awesomest people you would ever have had the chance to meet. A gentle soul. The guy was just so awesome. He held Bible study for us. Um, in the top floor of our dorm rooms. He was just an awesome man. And when I think about people at Ohio State outside of Tressel, and even Luke Fickle, Doug Davis always comes to mind.
Yeah. All right. Is it all right if I ask a tough question? You could say I'm going to pass. Do you think, being a Luke Fickle guy, do you think Ohio State should have at least given him an interview before they hired Ryan Day?
I agree. Yes, I do. You got a guy who is an Ohio guy who played at Ohio State, who came back, coached at his alma mater. And not to say it didn't happen, because behind closed doors we never know. But I would have loved to have seen, and I'm satisfied with Ryan Day. I love the guy, met
Mm-hmm.
him a handful of times, but it'd have been neat to see Luke Fickle, kind of take the reins after been an assistant for so long, and then having the rough year after Trussell left. To have the opportunity to kind of develop a program that he grew up in. But I think ultimately the Cards played out the way they should have, and now he's at a school that has great history as well, so he's doing well.
Yeah, I'm as a Buckeye fan, I am terrified of that game this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
that is the game because you can tell us more than anybody. That's a tough place to play,
Oh,
especially at
oh
nighttime
yeah.
when it's rocking, right?
It's so actually Wisconsin was actually my first college football visit. When they played Illinois in 2007 or six. And then you go to a game, it's like, oh, it's all right, it's a small stadium, and then you go and play against those dudes at night. It's a different atmosphere, man. They only seat 60 some thousand people, but I tell you what, they know how to put it together. And having a guy like Luke Fickle who knows toughness, who knows grit, uh, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
That one might have me more scared than just about anyone on that schedule this year. That one's circle that one. That that one could be interesting. Here's a great question from Robert Allen. What do you like about our defense now, and what would you change? Great question, Robert.
I love that we're a multiple defense. Like we don't we're not just vanilla. We don't come out and do one thing and then hope we get good at it. I love the fact that Coach Knowles came in. He kind of threw the book at the team at the defense and forcing those guys to think, forcing those guys kind of like you said, Alabama. Those guys run a sophisticated defense, which throws the offenses off. And I think the teams got settled. I think towards the end of the year, and I think going into the spring this year, and now into the season. Um, I love the fact that they have so many different packages, so many different schemes. The one thing I would like to see more is just blitzing. I feel like we've been most chaotic over the years in our defense is when we just blitz. Um, and not to say that that won't happen. I think with having Knowles in, putting in the sophisticated defense, you got to get your coverages down, packing, and you kind of run your blitzes based on those coverages. So I can understand why we did it, but I think as the season get kicked off in a month or so, that we start to see more blitz packages, things like that, to kind of put heat on quarterbacks instead of having our defensive back standing back, having to cover guy for 3 or 4 seconds.
And as a former linebacker, I'm sure you're like, yeah, let's blitz the linebacker, right?
I listen. If I could blitz every play, I would have, man. I love it. Literally, I literally.
You were living in the backfield, man, in 2010. I remember. Hey, that reminds me of a question. Okay. I remember the Navy game when they were going for two, right? And it's like, what is happening? And okay, you get the INT like in the end zone, right?
Yeah.
If I recall right. And then you ran it back. And then it's only 2 points. I'm like, he ran all that way for 2
For two
points, man.
points, I tell you what, you don't think about it, or at the time I did it. Honestly, I was a little tired. That game, man. They draw the game out. We're running the ball, running the ball. But that play in particular, we ran that play in practice every bit of 25 times in the spring and then preseason. And I remember Luke Fickle right before we went out on the field. He said, "Now remember, if the quarterback rolls out, Brian, I want you to blitz. But if he stays in the pocket, I want you to stand there and he'll throw you the ball." Like literally, those are Luke Fickle's exact words. And if you watch the quarterback kind of move maybe 2 feet to his right, and I kind of stood there, he threw me the ball. I mean, and I'll go back to Luke Fickle. It's like he had like little things like that to where he was way more prepared than we were, to where he could tell you just be there and the play is going to find its way to you, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, all 100 yards for 2
It,
points.
yeah, I probably should have took a knee or something, but I think there was like still a minute and a half left in the game.
Yeah.
They still had a chance, so I think it kind of put a little more pressure on them to have to throw the ball after that.
No, man,
Yeah,
when you can get a pick too, I mean, come on. I don't know. I might have to look this up. You might be the only Buckeye in history with a pick two.
Probably.
Put it in the record books, man.
but you got to get yours when you get the chance, being on defense, man.
Seriously,
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have been able to live with myself taking the knee at the 2 yard line or something. So yeah, I had to take it back, and I had to show the wheels a little bit.
There you go. That's right. That's right. There you go. Chris, you got a question before we talk about James?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what, Brian, was your favorite memory as a Buckeye?
Oh man,
The pick two.
the picture was up there. Um,
I mean, I know you had a big game against Iowa, and
I would say the Rose Bowl.
yeah,
Um, and you watch games like USC Texas as a kid,
mm,
and honestly, as a kid, I never thought about playing college football. I just loved to watch the game. Um, but I remember going out there, and you get the atmosphere of being in Pasadena. It's just it literally gives you goosebumps thinking about it. But I remember coming out actually after the first half. You come out and the sun's going down. You look out over the back of the stadium. You see the mountain range in the back of the stadium, and literally just kind of like I had like plays going in my head of watching that USC Texas game. And I remember telling myself like, we're gonna do something crazy tonight. We weren't slated to win that game. We were underdogs to Oregon, and then having the opportunity to do it on a big stage like the Rose Bowl, man, it's one of those things that literally you can only dream about. And fortunately for us, we had the opportunity to live out that dream.
now I got to ask you too, just as a follow up, because I'm glad you mentioned the Rose Bowl. Obviously, the Big Ten's expanding. We've got USC, UCLA coming in. Do you think that playing in the Rose Bowl as part of the regular season is going to diminish in any way the Rose Bowl game itself?
I don't think so. The Rose Bowl is still the Rose Bowl. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
think you go out there for a regular season game. The atmosphere is going to be so different. The tone of that game will be so different. And then you go there that week, obviously, all the media, all the hype around it makes it what it is. I don't think it'll have any effect on the game itself. I think if anything, it'll give players, a little bit more, fire to want to, make it to that game if we don't happen to make it to the national championship if it's not in that game. But no, anytime you get to play on that field, man, is awesome, and you're one of very few people when you do get a chance to play in that game on that field to do so.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it diminishes it for the Pac-12 teams when they're in the Rose Bowl and they get to play on it every other year for the most part. So, yeah, I would think that it's still going to hold some power for the Midwestern schools. Brian, you had 2 years crossover with James Laurinaitis when he was a player. Of course, now he's our linebackers coach here at Ohio State. What was James like as a player and as a leader on that defense?
And James was awesome. So as a freshman, you come in, you don't really meet the older guys really until halfway through the summer. All the freshmen kind of work out together. And I remember our first workout with the older guys, and I was outrunning everybody. I always tell this story too because you think about this stuff as a former player. I remember coming out, it's a bigger group of guys. You see guys like Malcolm Jenkins and those guys. I didn't really know who they were at the time. And I remember running 3:30, so around the football field. And this guy's beating me every time. I'm like, who the hell is this dude? And it was James Laurinaitis at the time. And I'm like, there's no way this dude's beating me in a race. Like, I don't get beat in a foot race. But then as I, went on with conditioning and learning who James was, the dude was one of the hardest working guys you'll ever meet. And one of the most humble guys you'll ever meet. I would never have known that James was an All-American and Bronco Nagurski Award winner. Um, but the dude he was just excellent, and as a leader, he was like a player version of Jim Tressel. The guy just the respect that guys have for him because of the hard work that he put in, because of the dedication he had to the game. He wasn't one of those guys that talked about it and wasn't backing it up. when it came to film study, being on time, doing things the right way. James, along with so many other guys on the team, was just the epitome of what it means to be a Buckeye.
Wow,
Boy,
that's
Eric, did you just get a warm feeling inside there?
I did. When he said the player version of Jim Tressel, I was like, my heart started pitter pattering there. What's James going to be like as a coach? Do you think?
Awesome. I mean, obviously the guy has a ton of experience with playing 10 years in the NFL, breaking and making so many records. I think it'd be awesome. Anytime you can, be coached by somebody at a school that played there, so he knows what it means to be at Ohio State, what our tradition is in that room of linebackers. I think he'll do nothing but make that group of guys better and make the program better. I don't know if there's another guy in this country outside of maybe Marcus Freeman or myself who would be even better linebacker coach.
Okay, okay. Oh,
Was
so
he?
do you
Did he
have a?
just throw his hat in the ring
He did.
in
He
case
did. I
James
caught
maybe
that.
sometime moves
I
up to the DC spot?
yeah. Future linebackers coach at Ohio State, Brian Rolle. I like it.
It is
Hey, you just you
awesome.
just you just brought up Freeman, man. So let's talk about Freeman over yeah, his favorite guy over at Notre Dame, man. Like, okay, so he makes the comments about not making the same mistake twice. He comes out and says, "I regretted saying that." People like Chris over there, like, I ain't going to forgive him. Tell us a little bit about Marcus Freeman as a person, as a human being, and how should we as Buckeye fans look at Marcus Freeman?
Man, Marcus Freeman is a friendly. I would say that Marcus is a great dude too, and obviously you get caught up in a moment at one point or another in your life where you may say something you regret, and obviously he did. But again, he's one of those guys you come into Ohio State and you get to meet him and who he is. And the guy's a starter, but he's a humble gentleman. Obviously soft spoken. He was actually really quiet at Ohio State, so he wasn't one of those rah rah guys. But I think he's a really good dude who's kind of uh, uh, paved his own way as a coach, and now obviously being at Notre Dame, I take my hat off to him because it takes what he went through with heart issues, couldn't play in the NFL, and then was able to
Mhm.
come back and coach. Actually, he was at Ohio State with me my senior year, working with Luke Fickle in the linebackers. So being able to be kind of coached by him and play with him was a neat experience. And I feel like as a nation that Buckeyes that we are, cut him some slack. He's still a Buckeye at heart. He's still our guy.
Cut him slack, Chris. You heard it. Brian Roll said
What?
so.
Give me a year, maybe two, and my blood pressure may come down.
Yeah. Oh, I understand. And of course, again, we are a proud people as Buckeyes. So yeah, take your time, but yeah, Marcus is a good dude. And again, once a Buckeye, always a Buckeye.
There it is. There it is. I love it. I love it. All right, man. So if let's say Ryan Day gets the itch to go back to the NFL and Andy Reid retires and he gets a chance to go coach the Chiefs. I mean, that's I don't care who you are, you got to consider that, right? And Ohio State's looking for a job. Do you think if Marcus Freeman was asked, would he leave Notre Dame for Ohio State?
It'd be hard for him to. I would say it'd be hard to leave Notre Dame only because it's you look at Notre Dame, look at Ohio State. I mean, you're looking at two of the biggest schools in the country. I would say it'd probably be more feasible for someone like Luke Fickle to leave Wisconsin
Ooh.
and come back to Ohio State than Marcus Freeman to leave Notre Dame.
Even after 1 year?
Yeah, I would say so, but it still is Ohio State. If I was in Marcus Freeman's shoes and my alma mater wanted me to come back and coach, that'd be a heck of a bind to be in. But again, once a Buckeye, always a Buckeye. And of course, you take on those colors when he went to Notre Dame. So if he
Mhm.
chose to stay there, if that happened, you couldn't blame the guy. But hopefully, Ryan's Day here for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think he'll right the ship, and we wouldn't have to have the thoughts kind of juggling around either about what the future may look like.
Good, good. I like the confidence there. Chris, you got another question before we wrap this thing up, man?
No, I've got nothing right now, Eric.
Okay.
You
All
know,
right.
you threw me off. You brought up the name again.
I did. I did. Well, I mean, Brian's been so
Actually,
pleasant to like want to
actually,
talk
yes.
about it, so I'm like,
You,
okay.
Eric, I do have one here
Okay.
because you and I have talked about it.
Mhm.
We've done reviews of the tradition talks.
Oh,
I
yes.
want to
Yeah.
know who Brian's Mount Rushmore of linebackers at Ohio State is.
Ooh. Well, I'll
God.
tell you this much right now. He wore the right number,
Uh,
36. Uh-huh.
uh, I mean, you can't not mention Casimir. I mean, that's like the first name that comes to mind.
Okay.
Um, and we just talked about him. James Laurinaitis was. I
Okay.
mean, just there's no way not to have him on there. And this next one may be a surprise to everybody listening and around. I'm gonna throw Ryan Shazier's name up there.
I almost said that.
That's not a surprise, really. I mean,
He's gonna say Shazier. Yeah.
I would say those would be the three guys I put up. I had to pick a fourth guy. Um, man, that is tough.
Spielman.
I say
Kuzino.
I say yeah. I'm like. But then it's like you leave somebody out when you mention the other
Yeah.
name. I say Chris. I'll give Spillman his flowers now. Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. I was gonna have to say something if you didn't pick number 36, Chris Spielman. Now, Brian Rolle, you did wear the right number. What was the story behind 36?
So my oldest brother, if you ever read stories of me in high school and everything, I always said I wanted to be like my big brother. My brother William Rolle, he wore 36 actually in little league football, middle school, high school. And when I finally decided I wanted to play football in high school, I said, you know what, I'm gonna wear 36 and I'm gonna do it right. And I wore it until I couldn't wear it. And that's where the number kind of came from. And then I get to Ohio State and I had to kind of learn the tradition of that number and respect it and wear it proud.
Good job. You did wear a great. And I tell you what, you have one of the more iconic jerseys because I think was it '09 or 10 when I think it might have been '09 when we went to the big house and you had to wear the throwback
Yeah,
white jersey.
yeah,
yeah.
That was an iconic look. That was I think we only wore that one time
yeah.
in the history of Ohio State since,
That
you brought
jersey,
that back.
that was my favorite jersey. The red ones I liked. We wore the red ones at home in 2010. But the white ones were pretty sick, and with the helmets, the white helmets with the black letters on it was pretty sweet.
Now I've heard through the grapevine that in November when we have the night game against Michigan State that they're going to wear an all gray and it's going to be the same jerseys the same color as the pants and helmet.
I like it.
That
We spoke about that when I was in college, and obviously we had our two games, against Michigan. But it's big tradition to wear, scarlet and gray, the uniform that we wear. But I think it's awesome that they took, you know, I forget the first time we even wore. I'm gonna say that there was a color rush, and then we say, you know what, let's do it again and again. I love it. Our colors, we hold them proud with the traditional scarlet and gray, but being able to wear the all black or wear the gray or all red is awesome to see.
Ryan Wickerham wants to say, "Hey buddy, if you come to Columbus for a game this year, you're going to have to stop by his tailgate." Now Chris and I are going to be doing a live show from his tailgate for the Penn State game. So if you happen to be there for the Penn State game, Brian, come on by Ryan's a tailgate and join us for that one. We'll be there. We're going to be doing a live show there. That'd be a lot of fun, my man.
I appreciate it, guys.
Last question, my famous last question. What does it mean to Brian Rolle to be a Buckeye?
It's everything. When I read in those documents that Trussell sent to me, same thing I said in 2009 holds true today. Is that it means everything. It's my life. Like I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't get accepted into Buckeye Nation, and take the 4-year trek through college, and now I have a lifelong brotherhood.
Hey man, that's a great question. Hey, I got one more question for you. Just popped in. I gotta ask this. This is a great one. Paul Buckeye says, "Thanks, Brian, Buckeye Boggs, and Chris. Who's our next Heisman? Who will be the next Heisman winner at Ohio State? Is he on the roster right now?"
Uh,
Ooh,
I would say, um,
Marvin Harrison
I would say,
Jr.
I, I would say it'll be tough. I would say Harrison will be our greatest chance this upcoming season to have someone win the Heisman Trophy. However, I think if Travion Henderson stays healthy, I think he could have a year, man. That'll be great. But it's hard when you got so many quarterbacks and so many different leagues that pass for 5,000-6,000 yards a season.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think those two guys would be our best chance this year.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, gosh, the game's changed so much in just the last 10, 15 years with, the spread offense and different things of that nature that I mean, gosh, defenses are having to go to like 4.25s all across the board,
Yeah.
and then you play the Navy and you get a pick too, It's like
Yeah.
hey man, Brian, thank you so much for coming on and being a part of the show with us tonight, man. It was a treat to have you. And again, thank you so much for all the joy that you've brought Buckeye Nation, for all the great memories, and I hope I get to meet you in person real soon.
I appreciate it, Eric, Chris. You guys have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Have a great night. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, everybody. Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Oh, not a problem, gents. I appreciate